By the end of this lesson, we should be able to apply the properties of logarithms, and we're going to be looking at three of them: the product property, the quotient property, and the power property. In order to look at the properties of logarithms, it would actually be really helpful to have a quick recap about the properties of exponents. We know that exponents and logarithms are related, so let's look at the properties of exponents. The first property that we know of is the product property. When we multiply exponents with the same bases, we add the powers. The second is the quotient property. When we divide exponents with the same base, we subtract the powers. And the last one is the power property. When an exponent is raised to a power, we end up multiplying the powers together. We've seen what the product property of exponents looks like. Let's see what the product property of logarithms is. The product property of logarithms follow the same rule as the product property of exponents. For exponents, when we multiply, we add. It's the same for logarithms. Here we have multiplication, which means we have addition. The rule also works in the other direction, which means if we have addition, we can simplify to multiplication. Okay, so now that we've seen the rule, let's use it in an example. Here we need to be able to write log 40 in terms of log 2 and log 5. So the first thing to do is we're going to try and write the number 40 using only the number 2 and the number 5. Well, that's easy enough. We should be able to get that 40 can be written as 2 times 2 times 2 times 5. Well, we have multiplication here. That means we can use the product property of logarithms and rewrite this using addition. So actually, log 40 is the same as log 2 plus log 2 plus log 2 plus log 5. Well, though we can go one step further and join the like terms together. So, the final answer for this question is going to be log 40 is actually equal to 3 log 2 plus log 5. You've seen an example, now it's your turn. Here are some questions for you to try. Pause the video here and press play when you've finished to see the answers. You will notice that there is a star next to one of the questions. This question is slightly more difficult than the rest, and you will be able to see a work solution at the end of the video in case you need some help. Well, since you've finished, here are the answers. How did you do?
Now before we continue, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. As a reminder, we offer private and group online math lessons on Zoom, where we cover all UAE National Curricula American and British curriculums. We also have the best MSAT math test preparation course with a 50% discount for groups. The first session is always free. So if you are interested in a free lesson, click the link in the description below. To book a lesson you can always send us a direct message on Instagram at Mr. Mathematics. Okay, with that said, let's get back to our lesson.
So we've done the product property. Let's have a look at the quotient property of logarithms. Like I said before, exponents and logarithms are related. So the quotient property of logarithms follows the same pattern as the quotient property of exponents. For example, when we divide exponents, we subtract the powers, and that is exactly the same thing for logarithms. Here we have division, so it means we must have subtraction. The rule also works in the other direction, which means if we have subtraction, we must also have division. So we've seen the general rule. Let's see if we can try and use it in this example. So this question wants us to write ln 49 over 81 in terms of ln 3 and ln 7. Well, let's start with the obvious. We have division, so we're going to be using the quotient property of logarithms and rewrite it using subtraction. So now we have ln 49 over 81 is equal to ln 49 minus ln 81. Well, now we have this ln 3 and ln 7 to deal with. How can we rewrite the numbers 49 and 81 using 3 and 7? Well, we can see that ln 49 becomes ln 7 times 7, and ln 81 becomes 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. Look at that, we now have multiplication, which means we can actually use the property we've already learned, the product property, and simplify this even further. So now we have ln 7 plus ln 7 minus ln 3 plus ln 3 plus ln 3 plus ln 3. So to get to our final answer, all we have to do is join the like terms together. So ln 49 over 81 is the same as saying 2 ln 7 minus 4 ln 3. So you've seen how to apply the quotient property in an example. Now it's your turn. Here are some questions for you to try. Pause the video here and press play when you've finished to see the answers. Well, it looks like you've finished, so here are the answers. How did you manage to do this time round? We've seen what the product property of logarithms looks like. We've seen what the quotient property of logarithms looks like. Let's have a look at the last one, the power property of logarithms. Like all the properties we've seen in this lesson, the power property of logarithms uses the same rule as the power property of exponents. When an exponent is raised to a power, we multiply it, and that is exactly what we do when dealing with logarithms. Here we have a power, so what we're going to do is multiply. And just like the other two properties, we can also use it in the other direction, which means if we have multiplication outside of a logarithm, we can actually change it so that it becomes a power. Okay, so we now know what the property looks like. Let's use it in a question. So, can you see there's not actually a power here? So what we're going to do is try to rewrite this fifth root of 64 with a rational exponent. So what we can do is write log to the base 4 fifth root 64 as log to the base 4 64 to the power 1/5. Which means we can now use the power property to rewrite this logarithm using multiplication. So our power 1/5 comes down and is multiplied in front. So we now have 1/5 log to the base 4, 64. You'd think that this is where we would end, but no, there is one more trick that we can use to simplify even further. And that's because this number 64 actually has a hidden power. 64 is the same as 4 to the power 3. So again, we can actually use our power property to simplify. So the 3 in the power can actually be moved to the front and be multiplied. So can you see how log to the base 4, a fifth root of 64, is actually the same as 3 over 5 log to the base 4, 4. Now, can you see something very special about this last line of our work? Do you see how there is a 4 inside our logarithm and a 4 at the base? We should know that if these two numbers are the same, then it actually simplifies to the number 1. So now we have that our expression of log to the base 4, fifth root 64 is actually equal to 3/5. Why don't you try on your calculators? See if you get the exact same answer. So now it's your turn to try and apply the power property of logarithms. Here are some questions for you to try. Pause the video here and press play when you finish to see what the answers are. And you'll notice that again, one of the questions has a star next to it. This question is slightly more difficult than the rest, and you'll be able to see a work solution at the end of the video in case you need some help. Well, I see that you've finished, so here are the answers.